Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 1. Hello, Podroonies or Podsters, if you prefer. This week, as Hitman is finally out on Netflix, it's been out in theaters a few weeks already now. So we'll be talking, naturally, Richard Linklater films. And of course, I am joined by a returning guest from this year, Andrew from the Revisionist Almanac podcast. I did not trip up on that. Yay. How are you?
I'm great. Well done, Martin. I was curious if it was going to trip you up again. I remember the fun of last time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of practice because I tend to read out your name a lot on part 2s with the Instagram responses because you're very kind and say your picks for each podcast. So I've got some practice in.
Good. I love following the show. Everything you do is great.
Yeah.
So happy to be back. Had a blast with you for Arrival and Sicario, and I'm sure we'll just have as much fun this time.
Absolutely. So if people don't already know, tell us about your podcast and where can we find you?
Sure. So again, the Revisionist Almanac. You can find us on all the socials at Rev Almanac. And the short and skinny of it is I, along with guests each month, look back on past Oscars years with the benefit of hindsight to determine what should have won Oscars and see if the Academy got it right or wrong. And then ultimately, what we decide goes up to an online vote, and the general public gets to determine what goes into the Revisionist Almanac as the revised winner.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, I've listened to a few. It's a great podcast. Do check it out.
Safe to say the Oscars aren't doing so well in real life with the revised awards. We're just taking them down left and right.
So Hitman then, have you managed to see it in theaters?
I haven't, with 2 young kids, I feel like theater time is limited for me. And so I'm kind of looking forward to it hitting Netflix, even though that's kind of, sucks that that's the way of the world nowadays where stuff hits streaming so early. But
yeah, Hitman definitely feels like it's kind of hitting the Netflix wheelhouse kind of thing. It's like a mid-budget movie where you got a pretty big star, but like the world isn't at stake. He's not a superhero. It's like that kind of one of those 90s thrillers that you used to see all the time in that period. And yeah, it looks really interesting with Glen Powell as starring in it in Richard Linklater's new film. And he's certainly gradually becoming a big star under the stewardship of Tom Cruise, I think. He's been in the likes of Top Gun Maverick, Anyone But You, I think, with Sydney Sweeney again, another actress that's really skyrocketing at the moment into stardom, I would say. Yeah, and Glen Powell's got like Twisters coming up,
which is going to be huge, at least over here in America.
Yeah, I did not expect we were ever going to see a sequel to that film, Twister. But right. Sure, go ahead.
Why not add a second one?
Yeah. But with Glen Powell in it, I'm like, yeah, it looks interesting. But certainly Hitman with Glen Powell looks really cool. He's in a lot of costumes and different hair and makeup as this kind of fake hitman. It's kind of difficult to grasp what is actually going on from the trailer. But yeah, it looks really interesting and something a little different from Richard Linklater.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person, I've avoided all trailers. Right. I just find the trailers nowadays, they just reveal so much, so it's easier for me to just kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I honestly I don't know what to expect from Hitman, other than kind of the brief synopsis I've seen. I've seen a couple of still images.
Yeah.
But like you said, Linklater's, he's kind of like a chameleon. He can do a lot of different stuff. He's never really pigeonholed himself into one genre or one thing. All of a sudden he's doing the Before trilogy and then he throws out School of Rock or A Scanner Darkly, which is like a really weird abstract movie. I mean, he can kind of bounce around. So I'm always curious to see what Linklater does. His last few films haven't been my favorites. Last Flag Flying, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, kind of under the radar. So his stock's relatively low. But I think having Glen Powell, who's clearly an emerging superstar actor, should be a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of got this kind of comedic, zany tone to it. So kind of in the zane of...
And it feels like a throwback, like you said.
Yeah, like a Steven Soderbergh type film, like Gone in 60 Seconds, sort of. That's just come to my head.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to watch Hitman when it comes out in Netflix, because I think it's one of those where it's going to have a very, very limited theatrical release.
And it feels like it's perfect for Netflix to get a large amount of people watching it opening weekend or whatever once it hits the platform.
Yeah. So, Andrew, what is your choice then for Richard Linklater films?
I went with 2014's Boyhood.
Nice. So why did you go for this one? Were there any other films in contention for you?
Well, so when I think of Linklater, the obvious choice is Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
But for anyone who knows me, if you've paid attention to me on social media, it's one of my like top 10 or 15 favorite movies. So if we went into this conversation with Dazed and Confused, you might as well just like give it 10 out of 10 on everything for me. So I was like, I'll put it to the side. So the reason I went with Boyhood, a couple of reasons. It's one of the few films in history to actually hold a perfect 100 on Metacritic score, which I thought was interesting. It's in rarefied air in that regard. It was up for a ton of awards in 2014. And I'm actually doing an episode of my show in a couple of months on the year 2014. And so I was like, you know what? I'll just kill two birds with one stone. It's a movie I need to go back to anyway. I loved it 10 years ago. So I was really curious to see how it would hold up for me over time.
2014 was an incredibly strong year. Like you had Whiplash and
oh my goodness, Nightcrawler, Grand Budapest Hotel,
so many good ones.
Birdman, I just kind of was glancing over. I haven't really dived deep into it, but just a murderer's row of movies.
Yeah, Birdman won Best Director, didn't it, I think, at the Oscars?
Yeah, Director and Picture.
Yeah, I was a bit bummed that Boyhood didn't win Best Director. I was just like, how can you... Like, the film was made over 12 years.
Right.
What's going on? It's never been done before.
It's literally something nobody's... It's never happened in the history of cinema, you know?
So surely a guarantee to go into the Almanac. Boyhood.
I would say, if for people listening to this, if they listen to my show in a couple of months, expect to hear Linklater's name from me a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens in Boyhood, Andrew?
Okay, so I remembered last time that I pulled directly from, I think, IMDb at that point instead of writing my own synopsis. That was the correct decision. I appreciate you for guiding me in that direction. So this time I pulled directly from Letterboxd on Boyhood. So the title is 12 Years in the Making. The film tells a story of a divorced couple trying to raise their young son. The story follows the boy for 12 years, from first grade at age 6 through 12th grade at age 17, 18, and examines his relationship with his parents as he grows.
Excellent. Well put. So, initial reactions for me for Boyhood, I think the first time I saw this, I think it's kind of interesting when you watch it because you're very aware of how this was made. Like there was a lot of buzz around it when it came out of how it was made. Like it was made over 12 years. They met up in the summer, I think, and shot for like 6 weeks or something, and then just moved on to other projects in that year, and then just came back every summer. So I kind of had that in my head a lot when I was watching this, and I struggled to like get into the characters and the story because I knew how this was made, and you're just constantly trying to look for, the cuts and where they're moving on to the next year and stuff. So like the first time I watched it, I very much appreciated it, but but then by the end, I was struggling to find a reason to come back and watch it again. I was like, yeah, this is a good film, but I'm not sure this is for me. Am I missing something here? Like, it's a good film, really well made, but I don't know. But then watching it again for this podcast, I allowed myself to just really sink into the story a bit more, sink into the characters a bit more. And I enjoyed it immensely. And it's just incredible just watching this boy grow up before your eyes in just under 3 hours. Yes, it's very long, but like, as I say many times, long films don't really put me off at all. It's only when I'm doing a podcast, I'm like, I'm not sure I want to do a 3-hour film and analyze it for that long. So.
Yes.
But
Been
so I
there.
was like, I need to start watching this really early and save some time. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. How about you? Initial reactions, Andrew?
Yeah, I saw it in 2014 when it came out. I would have been mid-20s at that
Yeah.
point, and I would say at that point in time, I drew a lot of parallels to Mason because there was, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the rest of this episode, but this movie feels very authentically Midwestern or Southern American. I myself
Yeah.
am from kind of that part of the country, and so at least for me, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of universal to my neck of the woods. And there's a lot of nostalgia effect to the movie. And I just saw myself in a lot of Mason. And now going back to it, I'm closing in on 40. I've got children of my own. And I've kind of like, my perspective has changed to where now I see a lot more of Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette's characters, the parents dealing with life, the way I didn't necessarily see them in my 20s 10 years ago. So I just saw a different appreciation for the film. And obviously nowadays it feels like everyone kind of looks back on Boyhood and they're like, oh, it's a gimmicky thing, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. And it's like Linklater's intention wasn't to make it a gimmicky thing, and he didn't like publicize for 12 years that he was doing this. It was just kind of like something him and his friends were just doing once a year to get together, and then they made it. And so I hope that people don't like go back with revised eyes and look at it as this this like terribly gimmick thing, because it's not that. It almost feels like you're watching someone's home videos and it's sort of a voyeuristic approach to filmmaking.
Really well made home videos.
yeah, really. Way better than my parents made for me, for sure.
Yeah. It's like, man, that home video looks amazing. How did you do that?
I loved it 10 years ago, and I still have tremendous respect and admiration for it. It's just, it really hits a lot of stuff for me right in the nostalgia.
So directing then, I think going into this film, as we've literally already said, most people would know that this has been made over 12 years because that's, the main selling point of this movie. But what I found interesting is that Linklater isn't making it obvious with like chapter headings or anything like that, but it's not that subtle, I don't think, either, like spotting where the new year starts. Like the haircuts are always different, like the costumes are different, and sometimes it's like Linklater just hits you with a hard cut, but mainly as the film goes on, you're looking out for the haircuts. But like when Patricia Arquette and Marco Perella meet Bill's character, they meet at college and he's clearly like taking a liking to her. Then we cut to them returning from a holiday in Paris. So I like how like Linklater is kind of treating the audience with respect, but also not making it obvious when a new year starts. So it's a simple thing, and I kind of like that. Yeah.
I love the subtlety of the transitions, and it feels like he uses, for me, there was two distinct points where you can kind of just subtly see it. The soundtrack sort of like kind of illustrates to you, okay, I remember that song coming out about here in time. And then there's like different technological advances. Like you see early on, Mason's playing like an Xbox, like the original. And then you're like, okay, I kind of know about
Halo.
yeah, right, exactly. And then he's playing a Nintendo Wii down the road. And you can just kind of trace things. Cell phones start appearing as we get towards the back end of the film. And you can just kind of pick up on little things without Linklater having to outright tell you, okay, this is Mason at year 7 or 9 or whatever. And I appreciate that approach where it's just, he's just kind of like letting it wash over you, and you can make out for yourself where he is in the story and where his character is in life.
I think what I found interesting about like, the directing and the script, I guess as well, you could put maybe this in both categories, but is the pacing is pretty quick. Like all the scenes are pretty short, but each scene never feels wasted or feels like they needed expanding to get like the points across. And I loved how forward thinking this film is in terms of how Linklater just immerses you into the noughties, as you say, like, and the early 2000s, where you have like Mason playing Halo on a pretty small TV. They go to like a Harry Potter book signing party. You see iPods at a party. And yet when they're filming this stuff, this is all like normal cultural stuff for them at the time of filming. So I love how Linklater's like, this is going to be cool looking back at this stuff when the film is finished. So I liked the attention to detail through like Mason's eyes in a very like forward thinking way. So I love how Linklater is very aware of all these cultural things.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys did this at school, like growing up, and I remember like in middle school and grade school, we used to do like time capsules where we would like collect various crap from, that period of time. And I think we'd like bury it, or I don't remember what the hell we did with it, but we'd like try to remember like the essence of that moment. And this film kind of feels like a time capsule for Linklater and company when they filmed it. Like you can go back and I'm glad you said the way the time moves doesn't feel cumbersome, at least. I mean, this thing's nearly 3 hours, and I watched it 3 times for prep for this, and I never once felt the length the way some movies can really seem to drag. And just because each period of time is like basically 10 or 12 minutes, it just kind of moves at a really brisk pace. And the other thing that impressed me was I'm always worried when I go back and watch stuff, especially that's shot 10, 20 years ago, how much of it's going to age really poorly, whether it's jokes or stuff. There's not a lot of this movie that ages poorly in terms of like homophobic words or like things like that. The like Linklater's really delicate with what he included in the film, which is astonishing to look at, and go back and go, wow, he like had the foresight to not touch upon certain areas. There's a couple of things you can maybe quibble with, like, the political nature of it and everything, but he walks a line.
The Biden McCain stuff, maybe.
Yeah, right, and all the Obama stuff, maybe, but yeah,
that's about it. It's interesting you point out the time capsule thing. Like, I never really understood that at school when you did that. I'm like, I'm not gonna see this again. I'm gonna. Right. I would have left school.
The teachers surely have moved on.
It would be really weird if I turn up to school, my old school, and be like, can I just come in and just see and dig up your play area so I can see the time capsule? They'll be like, no, go away. I never understood that.
It makes me want to send like an email. Yeah. Like, do you still have this capsule I did 20 years ago?
That makes no sense.
And I'm also curious. I was taking a bunch of notes on this that I already kind of mentioned. This movie feels, like I said, distinctly American, Southern, Midwestern to a part. And I kind of was writing down, I had like a nostalgia test going for myself. And I'm like, I wonder how much of this stuff translates to the UK, to the world at large. I don't know. You had touched upon the Harry Potter book release. I'm sure that was obviously huge.
Oh, yeah.
Globally. But like early in the film, Mason's playing the Oregon Trail computer game, which is like we still talk about Oregon Trail
really,
like in day-to-day life here in America. I don't know if that's a thing over in the UK. So I'm curious, did all those cultural references like cross the pond?
Not with that game, no. Definitely with Halo. Like, I remember going to my friend's house playing Halo a lot. Well, it wasn't necessarily Halo. I think it was more GameCubes. Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation.
And they're like eating s'mores at one point. And I'm like, I wonder if you guys eat s'mores over there. Like, do you camp as much as we do? I don't know if that's an American thing.
Yeah, we definitely camped a lot around where we are in the South. So that's definitely brought me back in terms of that. Definitely Harry Potter, the Harry Potter stuff was kind of really cool to see and they don't, that scene with the Harry Potter book signing party, we didn't necessarily have parties like that. It was more, you just queued down the street for fucking miles until the shop opened to get a new book,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit too old for the Harry Potter craze. Yeah. Like, I missed kind of the window of it, but I have to imagine it was culturally even probably more massive over for you guys than it was over here in America.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at school, that was the only the only books that people were reading were Harry Potter books, for sure.
Yeah, so, and I kind of pulled some people online about this and asked them what their opinions and memories. And I had some other people reach out to me from the UK, and everyone kind of in unison said this movie just hit them in a place of memory and nostalgia. So it does feel like maybe it's bigger than I maybe thought it was, where it feels so specific to me, but maybe it feels that way for everybody.
Yeah. Apart from one scene, which is one of my favorite scenes, just because of how shocking it is as a British person.
What's that?
Which is when Ethan Hawke's character, Mason Sr., has like a new girlfriend, Annie, and they go meet her parents, which is somewhere in Texas, I think, I presume. And it's Mason's 15th birthday. And it's shot in such a way that you can really feel like the slight awkwardness in the room when he gets a Bible as a present, which I found was very kind of effective in that way. But then Annie's dad brings out a shotgun, and I'm like, surely that's not for Mason. Yep, that's Mason's birthday present. It's a 12 gauge double barrel shotgun.
Which I have a shotgun
Wow.
passed down from my dad as well. That is distinctly an American thing. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, they're just casually letting the kids fire these guns outside.
Yes.
I mean, if I got a shotgun for my 15th birthday, I'd be like, are you fucking nuts? What's going on?
Yes, guns are very American, and we love, especially in Texas of all places.
Yeah, that was just like, whoa, that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, because you guys have pretty restrictive gun laws comparatively.
Yeah, it's illegal.
Yeah, right. As it should be, quite honestly.
Directing score then for me for Boyhood. It's a really interesting episode actually for this podcast, because a lot of the podcasts are usually very directing heavy. I don't think this will be the case for this one. So my directing score, yeah, I'll go pretty high, to be honest. I think just from a producing point of view as well, to just get everyone to agree to come back every year for 6 weeks, I presume in the summer, to come back and shoot this. I mean, especially for the kids as well. Like, this is a huge risk to like ask, Lorelei Linklater, Richard Linklater's actual daughter, to come back and act in this film for him and the kid, because you're just experimenting with them and just to see whether they will actually come back, because at any point they'll be like, no, I don't want to do it, I want to do this again. Maybe they sign contracts, I'm not sure, but
apparently they couldn't sign a contract
because they're too young. Yeah,
when it went past you could only sign it up to like 10 years or something,
right? Yeah,
and so they just sort of had to take a flyer on hoping this thing was going to stick through.
Yeah, so that's a huge risk. So just from a producing point of view, it's kind of really impressive that they brought a lot of these characters back and to get such brilliant performances out of these kids. So, and I don't think Linklater does anything particularly special with the directing with the camera, and I don't think he needs to. He's really just letting the actors shine, keeping things very simple. So yeah, I think I'll go like an 8.7 for me.
This was so hard, Martin, this particular category, because like you had on the outline I'm looking at, I was kind of looking through shots from the film that stood out, because that's kind of a lot of times when you talk about a director, you're talking about them like having a vision for, what you're seeing on screen. Aside from the opening shot and the final shot, which I think are good bookends in terms of like Linklater kind of saying like, okay, I can pull off a really cool image if I need to, where it's, the Mason on the grass at the start, and then at the end, Mason looking out into the vastness of basically the rest of his life. Other than that, the movie is basically just one man's sort of vision for what this thing will look like, because I can't imagine how Patricia and Ethan and all of the actors, I don't know how they could keep heads or tails of like what this thing was going to look like after over a decade in time, and like what was probably in the editing room that Linklater had to look through. I went incredibly high on this score.
Okay.
I gave it a 9.5 just because
Okay.
I think it's one of the most interesting directing feats I can ever think of. I mean, no one had ever thought to do this prior. No one's really done it since. Apparently Linklater's working on one right now with Paul Mescal, where they're doing a 17-year project.
Wow.
So maybe we can watch that when we're 60.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's an ambitious director. I appreciate him taking a swing. I think it's executed phenomenally. So yeah, I went really high, because I think the direction's the kind of the linchpin to this film. Is no one else could have pulled it off if you look at it from my standpoint.
Absolutely. Right. Screenplay then. As you go through this film, like the comparison between the kid and adult characters are like really interesting to me, where they're not too dissimilar from each other in terms of their situations. Like both parents are in school like the kids are. Like the adults have major issues to contend with. Like Ethan Hawke doesn't have a job and very much tries to hide that from Mason and Samantha. Their mum is in an abusive relationship to Bill, who's an alcoholic and has another relationship with an alcoholic. So going in, you have, you would think that we would see more of Mason and Samantha's issues at like school and with their friends, but it's more them being stuck in the middle of all these like family problems, stuck in the middle of the adult problems, which frankly is more true to life, I think. And the kids come out looking like they've got their shit together way more than the adults, which surprised me watching it. But I shouldn't be really, because it just feels more real that way, Yeah.
Oh,
So it's
absolutely.
just really interesting watching and comparing, the adult lives and the children growing up,
Yeah, it would have been fascinating to like see an actual physical screenplay of this film, because I can't conceptualize there being a ton of like dialogue on the page. It feels very much like created in the moment, spontaneous, just like it sort of felt like Linklater turning a camera on and just letting the actors kind of improv and ad lib to a degree. Now, if that's the case, I don't know, but it sure felt like it was just creative freedom for these actors, and a certain amount of trust between director and actors and cast and crew. And so the screenplay, I'm in a weird spot with it because it feels like it's written really well, but I don't know how much of that was actually like pen to paper and just these actors pulling out these great moments from the top of their head. I'm not sure. This is a really, again, a tough category to pin down a score for.
Yeah. As you say, it's just a really interesting to see and speculate how Richard Linklater went about this, because I remember there's been recent news actually that from the UK that an old like noughties sitcom is coming back for its final episode at Christmas called Outnumbered, and that show was all about this young family trying to deal with their very young kids. So it was like a 5-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And half of that sitcom was improvised because they didn't know what these kids were going to say, because they were so young. And that was the whole like concept of the show, and it was hilarious. And coming back this Christmas, they're all really old now. So
that's fascinating.
I would imagine that would be really all completely scripted. So it's a similar thing here, but certainly in a drama perspective, and there's some comedy in there, absolutely. So it's just interesting how these, how Ella Coltrane and Lorelei Linklater kind of changed the script maybe throughout filming this. Like, after they finish each segment, is he rewriting it? Did he not expect it to go down this route, or was he just very much just guiding the young actors to, and telling the adult actors, Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, to write, this is kind of what's written on the page, but also you have room to improvise and with what the kids are saying, but we have to kind of get to this point at the end of the scene. Let's run it a few times. And I'd imagine they did it like that, maybe.
It feels like almost like a theater workshop to a large degree. Like they're this troupe coming together and each sprinkling in a little bit of like maybe their own real life. Ethan Hawke was obviously going through his own marital issues in real life with Uma Thurman, and like I'm sure Patricia's had. Like I feel like there's a little bit of each of their real personalities sprinkled into the script here and there.
So as you say, so it would be really interesting to see like what was on the page, like at the beginning, 12 years before they started to the end, because I would imagine that Richard Linklater is very much talking to Ella Coltrane, especially when he is, 12, 15, maybe in the middle and latter parts of the film, of like, how are we going to end this kind of thing? And I think we'll get into it, but like, I think it's just beautifully, beautifully done towards the end.
Yeah, and it's funny that we're like juxtaposing this with the other movie we'll be talking about in a little bit, which is so dialogue heavy and very, that movie I think is very much on the page and two actors. But like this one feels a lot like Linklater's first film, Slacker, which is basically just like him running around the city of Austin and the various areas of Texas with a camera and finding these weird, strange people living their day-to-day lives. Like it sort of feels improvisational and like, again, voyeuristic. Like you're seeing a little window into something that's very real. Yeah. And this movie has tremendous immersion into real life. Like I don't feel like I'm watching actors. I'm sure we'll get to it in the acting part, but I feel like there's a real bond between everyone you're seeing on camera.
Absolutely.
in a really fascinating way.
Yeah. And I feel like while watching this film, like a lot of Richard Linklater films, it's, a pretty chill experience watching them. Like he does a lot of like hangout films, as you say, Slacker. Yeah. And, easygoing stuff. But when Bill's character comes into Mason's life as his stepdad, like the scenes start to get a little bit more uncomfortable. Like he's telling his own son that he should have done like his science project while he was away, but in front of like the whole family at a restaurant. I mean, who does that? Then he swears in front of Mason and his son while they play golf after he misses like a very easy putt. I'm like, come on, man, I could have easily putted that. So he's not a particularly nice character at all. Then, of course, you see Bill holding a bottle of liquor hiding a bottle of liquor in a cupboard. Then from then on, like every time you see him, the tension increases to that incredible dinner table scene where he throws like a glass at Mason, and it smashes everywhere, covering the cameraman. Then there's like a great scene where you think that they've seen the last of Bill, where Mason is just enjoying himself riding his bike with his friends, and when he comes back home, you hear at first Patricia Arquette like sobbing on the floor, and you're like, what the hell is going on? And I love the fact that the garage door is like half closed, so when Bill comes out, you only see like the waist down on him holding a glass of whiskey or something, and it makes it more kind of tense in a way, a little bit, with the fact that there's some separation with the camera outside to give this a very like unpredictable like quality to it. But also what I liked is that because this film is pretty much from Mason's perspective, we don't see Bill like all the time. So when Bill does show up, like the tension and unease comes into play immediately. You're like, oh God, what's he going to do?
Just their relationship between Bill and Mason is really fascinating in the little, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes of time that those two are like, because it starts out and Bill is so nice. He's so sweet. He's clearly putting on his best face for Patricia Arquette and Mason. And then even at the beginning of the relationship, he's sort of demeaning to his own son, but he's still trying to like they're playing charades at the house. And he's sort of being nice to Mason at first. And so there's this weird relationship that you're seeing. And then as Mason starts getting a little bit older and starts, seeing a little more as he's, maturing in age, he starts to see more of Bill, kind of doing these things to his mother. And, obviously Patricia Arquette's character, she's going through school. So her attention is to something else. So she's not seeing all the signs in place for Bill's, sort of demise into alcoholism and the way he's treating the children. It's really fascinating. And I also love that there's not total conflict resolution in a lot of the situations. Like you don't really see the end point or you don't see even, you don't see Bill hitting her necessarily or anything like that. And then even later when we get to the next relationship that she has with Jim, I believe his name is, and that whole situation just like ends with, you never see them get separated or anything like that. It just like, okay, they're not together anymore. And I appreciate that Linklater kind of does that to where, again, he lets the audience be smart enough to piece things together. And Mason's not seeing the whole picture. And so therefore we're not seeing the whole picture. And I just think it's a really cool POV.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think that you get, not just with like Patricia Arquette's relationships, is you have that with a lot of things as well. As I kind of said in directing, like the scenes are really short and they really give you enough information and not too much either to really understand like what's going on, where their head's at. And as you say, like it's all from Mason's point of view. So it's just a really interesting balancing act that Richard Linklater has achieved miraculously, frankly, in creating just these whole characters with kind of in these short scenes, and yet you feel like you understand them completely, even though you're only seeing one perspective.
Absolutely. And what surprised me about the screenplay structure of the movie is, I knew we were kind of like honing in on some lines, whether it be funny or interesting, and I'm thinking, I wonder how much in terms of like actual dialogue I'm going to remember, because it feels so spontaneous. And I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much I have down for lines that were memorable, because whether it's like, again, whether it's pen to paper with these lines were written down, or whether these actors are coming up with these lines on the spot, I don't know. But I was pleasantly surprised and impressed with how much I took away from the lines that really carried the movie and kind of stuck with me for for longer than the movie actually is.
Yeah, I've got quite a few as well. In the latter half of this film, like Mason is starting to realize that his mum and the adult world isn't so different from his life as a 17-year-old kid. When he visits his sister Sam at college, he talks to his girlfriend, I can't remember her name now, Sheena, that his mum has got a degree and is still kind of confused about what she wants to do with her life still, and she like has a boyfriend who seems to be another drunk Jim, and of course he doesn't like Mason and is worried how she's going to like pay the bills. So with Mason, he's trying to figure out if like photography is for him and what is exactly the meaning of college for him. So it's just really satisfying watching Mason grow up to see his views on life when we've actually seen a lot of his experiences that have informed these opinions in the film. And it's actually a lot like what teenagers think about at that age anyway, like what is the meaning of life, really quite clever stuff for me. Then by the end of the film, when he meets his people, so to speak, his college friend has kind of the same view as him, that life takes you for a ride and the moment is like all the time. So just a great satisfying end for Mason and a great place to end the film for me. Like I don't feel like I need to see any more of his story. It feels very complete in that sense. But yeah, it's just remarkable for me, like with the writing here, that they've kind of worked this out, that in the first half, hour and a half, Mason is absorbing all this kind of life experience, trauma, fun, what have you, everything. And then because we've witnessed that in what feels like real time, because we're seeing the same guy grow up, and then his own opinions have all been molded by that. And because we've actually seen it, it's just quite amazing. Yeah, for me, that all that stuff works.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of genius how like I couldn't have put it any better than you just did there, where it's like you're literally seeing this person's life before your eyes condensed into a couple of hours, and it's like it just blows me away how smooth it goes. And I cannot respect the degree of difficulty for Linklater to cast somebody at the age of 7 and hope that this child is going to like grow into something by 18, that this person's going to want to continue to do this and develop and like carry a screen presence. I mean, that's a lot of faith to put in a child to carry the weight of your movie for over a decade. And it works. I mean, I trust everything that goes on with Mason's character. I feel connected to him the whole time through. I never once, as much as I love Dazed and Confused, some of the kid characters in that movie feel like bad actors at times, especially going up against like the Matthew McConaughey's and stuff. But like this movie, I never feel like the kids are bad actors. It feels like they're doing their job as much as Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, who are seasoned and pros.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny and interesting lines then. There's a bunch I've written down. So near the start, from a very young Samantha, where she's like, I'll never like Mummy as much for making us move. Samantha, why don't you say goodbye to that little horseshit attitude, okay? It was great. Because before that, she says goodbye to like loads of things about the house. And yeah, that was cool. I like that one.
Yeah, one of my favorite early lines is when they're going bowling, and it's the first time we see Ethan Hawke's character come into play, and he's taking the kids out, and he's being the cool dad and everything, and Mason's getting dejected because he keeps throwing the ball in the gutter, and Ethan Hawke says, "Life doesn't give you bumpers," and I just thought that was like he's trying to like instill this like fatherly wisdom into his child, but like the kid's 6 or 7 at that time. Like, put some bumpers up and let him have fun. Like, you're like demoralizing him at a very young age.
That's really harsh.
Yes.
Let him score some points.
And I've got kids right at that same age, and so like I can just imagine their like just their life getting so spiraling out of control by just throwing that ball in the gutter over and over.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's like, nope, I'm not putting that up. You got to score some points like an adult. I'm not an adult though.
Yes. As I don't care. You're this or that. Like you like every parent's either the bumper parent or not. And I think I'm the bumper parent, I guess.
Yeah. Sit your butt down. Yes, sir, mother, sir. Was cool. Well, one of my favorites from Ethan Hawke is when Ethan Hawke is like picking the kids up from the grandmother, and she says, "Seatbelts." And then Ethan Hawke's like, "Seatbelts, all right, don't forget your seatbelts. It's not like this car has any seatbelts." Very nice muscle car, though.
Yes, yeah, that was a nice GTO for sure. And again, it's just like the cool dad flex. Like he's trying so hard to appeal.
And I love the kind of the arc with the car as well. Like that reveal that when towards the end, when he picks them up again, were just Ella Coltrane, and he was just like, "You were supposed to give me your car when I was 16." I was like, "Oh, well, I had to sell it, and it was mine to sell." Not I do not remember saying that, so that was kind of a nice little moment as well.
That's the moment in the scene where Ethan Hawke's character goes from being like, again, he's trying to be the cool dad, and he's trying to like still relive his youth, and that's the moment he becomes a middle-aged, typical dad. He's got the van, he sells the GTO, and it's like, okay, he's accepted his place as the elder statesman finally, and it's a tough reality for a teenager to face, thinking he's going to get this car his whole life. But it's a great moment for sure to tie that whole car back around.
And he has some great scenes with Samantha Lorelei Linklater, where he says, because he's struggling, I think in Austin, he's struggling to like talk to his kids. They just won't talk to him properly, and he's just like, "What is so hard to answer about what sculptures are you making?" And then she's like, "It's abstract." "Okay, that's good. See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you were interested in abstract art." "I'm not. They make us do it." Which I found hilarious.
There's another line in that same car scene when they're going to a baseball game, and clearly the kids don't care that much about baseball, but like Ethan Hawke's character is very much into the Houston Astros, and he's like, get to know them, get to hate them. And that's like, I feel like already as a dad who's a sports lover myself, I'm already like telling my kids like, hey, this is the team we got to like because they're my team. This is the team you got to hate because they're the bad team. And like, so I can see myself more and more through the dad character as this movie goes on.
Yeah. I definitely had that, I think, with my dad. I just kind of copied the team that my dad supported, to be honest.
Same, for sure.
My brother was more independent and just picked the team that was winning everything, Man United. But I was a fool to follow my dad and support Tottenham, but oh well.
Oh, not.
Yeah.
Well, one day you'll get a trophy.
One day. Right. I wish I could be a better parent to you guys, all right? And I hope that you can learn from my mistakes, okay? So wear a condom. You got any others, Andrew?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. I have.
Yeah.
So this line is so out of place, but it kind of brings a moment of levity to the situation. And it's the scene you're talking about earlier when Bill's finally like had his combustible moment. He's throwing the glasses and stuff. And he gets up from the table and he just like drunkenly shouts, "I hate squash." And it's like, it's so random, but like, that's like in his mind, he's like decided the squash is the reason why he's going to lose his temper. I like had to kind of laugh at the moment of like, I think we've all had moments where we get mad and frustrated at silly shit. Yeah. And like, I hate squash is just going to be my moment now where like when I have a bad moment, I'm just going to shout, "I hate squash," I guess.
I really wanted one of the kids to say, "What, the racket sport?"
One of my other lines is, I'm a huge Beatles fan. And so the whole Beatles scene in the car on Mason's 15th, when Ethan Hawke's telling him there's no favorite Beatle, it's in the balance. That's what makes them the greatest fucking rock band in the world. I 100% after the movie made my own Black Album, just like Ethan Hawke did.
Amazing.
I think he posted on social media like the full set list. Like he actually physically made this for his own child in real life. Wow. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to do that. I'm a Beatles obsessed person. So I have a Beatles Black Album around here somewhere.
Cool. I think my favorite though is fairly near the beginning when Ethan Hawke has got Mason around his house, like a really crummy flat apartment, as you guys say, and he says, Mason says, "But like right this second, there's like no elves in the world, right?" And he's like, "No, technically no elves." I just think it's such a kid thing to say, it's just spot on for me. I feel like I would have asked that to my own dad at some point when I was very small. Yeah.
Yes, as with kids who are 4 and 6 right now, I get asked probably daily, "Dad, are there monsters for real?" You know, like I'm constantly playing that dad who's like, "No, there's no monsters or whatever." You know, like they're just hitting that age where like fear and that stuff's kind of getting into their mind and all these
Yeah.
fictional things that are out there. So that's a good callback. The probably the funniest line for me was it's late in the film and Mason's got his first job. He's doing the dishwashing, and I feel like anyone who's ever worked in a restaurant has this restaurant manager in their
Yeah.
life somewhere. And like, he's trying to like get Mason to work harder. And he's like, I got you pegged for fry cook this summer. And that's a lot more responsibility. And like, it's like Mason doesn't care about being a fry cook, you know, but like this guy's trying to motivate him in the only way he knows how. It just cracked me up, that line.
I found it was weird as well that he turned up at his graduation party. I was like,
and
what
gives
are you
the
doing
speech.
here?
Yes. Yeah, he brings him a savings bond. Yeah.
Screenplay score for me then. Yeah, I'm going to go pretty high for this, just with the fact that, you know, I think it kind of goes into both when we're talking directing and screenplay, when we're talking about, you know, how Richard Linklater has made this film over 12 years. I mean, that's just an extraordinary achievement. And for me, I would put that more in screenplay, and also just with the fact that, as we've kind of said, like the risk in attempting this and just kind of writing it, using the time off to really mold this story from really not necessarily knowing how the film is going to end and how the film is going to turn out from page one, and to just mold this story so incredibly and just feels so authentic is just an incredible achievement for me. And yeah, there's just so many like memorable lines. All the characters feel so real. Like it I mean, at times in this film, not all the time, but like at times in this film, I feel like I'm literally watching a documentary and I'm just like there observing these people's lives. So yeah, I'll probably match you up with your directing score and go 9.5 for the screenplay.
So we're just going to like flip flop, I think, because I went so high on directing and I'm like, I guess I got to balance this a little bit. And because I couldn't like fully determine where the line blurred between what was and not what was not actually like written down in terms of actual physical screenplay, I kind of softened this score a little bit. So I went 8.4.
Okay.
I thought if I balance out the directing and the screenplay together to give it a cumulative score that's pretty strong, I feel more comfortable. Whereas, you know, again, I don't know how much I can put in this being like great pen to page work versus just really incredible direction. It's kind of a blurred lines between the two.
Yeah, definitely. Right, acting then. There's a lot to say about acting, for sure. I think I don't know. Let's talk. So Ethan Hawke's entrance to this film is really interesting from like an acting perspective, because we've been told that he's been in Alaska and is coming to visit them in Houston. And when he turns up at their house, he gives off like a bunch of energy and at first seems like a really cool dad. But when they go bowling, he treats Mason and Samantha like they're teenagers. He doesn't allow Mason to use the bumpers on the bowling lane, and he's so excited when he gets a strike himself, and not that sympathetic when Mason, you know, when his ball goes in the gutter. And I love the part where Samantha is like gesturing to Mason that he's been smoking the good stuff. That was funny. But I loved like the next scene from Ethan Hawke when Patricia Arquette arrives to like pick the kids up, and when she like knocks on the door. I love how Ethan Hawke kind of whole demeanor like subtly changes to looking a little nervous, as well as like trying to mask that from Samantha, the kids. You can definitely feel like the awkward tension between them when they meet again, and then it kind of all kicks off a little bit outside. Like really great acting for me from those two in that scene.
Yeah, and Ethan Hawke's long been one of my favorite actors. Just about everything he's ever done, I've been impressed with. And I think one of the things I noticed watching these two movies in specific so close together is he is tremendous at always elevating everyone else he's in a scene with without having to do too much work to like show that he's lifting them up. And I think of like Training Day, which is off topic, but like everyone talks about Denzel in Training Day, which is he's doing crazy shit that whole movie. But like Ethan Hawke is carrying a lot of the load of that film, and happy to just like give it to Denzel. And in this movie, I feel like Patricia Arquette's character carries so much of the struggle of parenthood to a large degree, and Ethan Hawke's acting performance is so good, and there's no vanity to either him or Patricia Arquette. They feel like two real humans, not people pretending to be, whatever they are. Like it feels like they're so grounded, they're so real, they're so humble as actors that it blows me away watching the two of them in this movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ella Coltrane as Mason is, of course, just a kid in the first hour or so. So I think like Richard Linklater it's just kind of guiding him through it sometimes, and I guess encouraging him to just be a kid and not really think about the acting, and you can definitely feel that, but like in a positive way, of course. And I feel like when he gets older and he does have to act, like when he gets bullied in the toilets at high school when he's about 14, I think he is a little wooden, I think, sometimes, and he doesn't really react that much in that moment. When he's a teenager, he's still quite quiet and awkward around his parents, which is understandable, and there's some nice, like, subtle stuff there. I enjoyed that, but he's way more relaxed when he's with his girlfriend, Sheena, and I loved the scene where they're driving to see his sister, and he's, like, chatting away, and it's like, where has this Mason been? It's just kind of really interesting to see him with his girlfriend, which obviously doesn't last that long, and you have that kind of a really great like breakup scene as well with her, and you feel like Ella Coltrane is really getting into it in this acting lark, in this film, and you can really see the growth there, as well as there's some really great subtlety when his acting when he is around his family which he's very much carried through with his experience as a kid earlier years before. So I really like that. Plus, I love the scene where they're in bed and Samantha's roommate comes in and he's brilliantly awkward. Yeah, that was great as well.
Yeah, through like the middle, like you just said, through the middle of the movie, he kind of gave me like some Edward Furlong vibes, where I'm like, okay, like when I think of like Terminator 2, I'm like, okay, Edward Furlong's a little... He's not great as a child actor at points, and he got better, I think, as he got older. And that's kind of how I felt about Ella Coltrane, was once this movie, you see the evolution of a child actor in real time in a way that like you've never seen it before, and like you said, he's sort of clearly being guided along at the beginning because he doesn't seem like he's an actor at that point. And then by the time he hits 16, 17, 18, you start to see, and that car scene is the exact moment when you're like, oh my God, like, he's like railing on social media and talking about all this stuff. And it's like, okay, he's got a point of view. He's got something he's trying to say. And it's the first time you see him. And maybe the whole point of that is like, that's how we all are, maybe as teenagers, where we sort of explode into this period of like being rebellious and, our own little renegade, even though we're sort of like shaking our fist at nothing. Cause what do we really know as a teenager? It's just kind of fun to watch him though.
Yeah, definitely. I love the little scene at Mason's college graduation party towards the end between Patricia Arquette and Ethan Hawke, where Hawke is basically saying thank you for throwing this party for Mason and complimenting her for doing a great job with the kids. And like, because throughout the film, like they don't actually share that many scenes together, it feels like. So it's really nice and cute that they have this like little scene together, and then Hawke offers to give her some money for the party and checks his wallet and has nothing, and it's like, Annie, my girlfriend, might have some money.
He's still reverting to his old self a little bit.
Yeah. Then we just see Patricia Arquette looking a little pissed off, like, yep, that's the old Mason Senior, which I found really funny. The poor girl.
Yes, yeah, because I think they're only in 3 or 4 scenes together, like the one you touched on earlier. And then you see him briefly interact when Mason's 15 and they're picking him up for the camping trip. And you see at that moment in time, it feels like 2 happy couples. And there's this sort of funny but awkward, like, step parents interaction. And like, my parents are still married in real life. But my wife's parents have always been divorced, and we've been together 20 years. And so I've seen like divorced parents up close for a long period. Right. And this movie really nails sort of the weird strangeness of divorced parents and like step parents coming in. And it's really fascinating to see that, because it mirrors a lot of what I've seen in my real personal life, which is
Okay.
clever.
Yeah, I did like that scene. Patricia Arquette is amazing towards the end of this film, I think, where you have this fairly like humorous family scene with Mason and Sam at this restaurant. And she explains that she's going to be selling the house because Mason is going to be going to college, etc. Then all of a sudden, like the manager of the restaurant comes to them and thanks Patricia Arquette for believing in him and saying he's a smart guy when he was just like this guy fixing her pipe. And like Patricia Arquette doesn't really know how to process that, like in a good way, watching the film. She's not really in shock, but it's like no one has ever said anything so profound as that to her before in her life. Then pretty soon after that, she breaks down in tears when Mason is about to go off to college, very much like what my mum did when I went off to university. So I know how that feels like, I guess, from the son's perspective. But she's also kind of sort of expressing the same question as like what Mason has been asking since he's been a teenager, like why has no one said anything like that to her before now? And it's that like realization that comes gushing out of her, in that moment. An amazing performance for me from her.
Yeah, those two scenes in particular, the scene with Ernesto, the sort of Mexican landscaper who turns out to be the restaurant manager at the end. And I just think that's a really clever thing, that you never know what interactions you have with people are going to affect things down the road. And it's just a reminder, be nice to people. Like like one kind word you say to something could change the trajectory of that person's life. You never know, and like it's a really poignant moment. That's when the emotional stuff really starts kind of hitting me in this movie. And then, like you said, that final scene with her, and she breaks down and she just says, "I just thought there would be more." And that is so interesting. And to tie the Beatles back into it, there's that famous John Lennon quote in the song, "Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans." And like, that's the truth of it, like I'm seeing time move by quicker with kids. Like time just, life happens faster, and it's, you're always sort of projecting, okay, what's next, what's coming. And it's like, you kind of have to stop every now and then and soak in the moment, because the last thing you want to do is look back after 18 years and be like, oh, I thought there would be more. It's a really tough line from her at the end there. Like, cause she's sort of seeing the end of her life, or what she thought it would be. And she spent all this time doing, in school and this and that and the other. And it's, the movie really gets emotional for me at the end, because I feel the weight of her. She deserved the Oscar for that. She won it, obviously, and very deserving.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I can imagine the next scene after, Mason is at college, established in college, and Patricia Arquette meets a guy and just like, are you an alcoholic? It's the first question,
I want to believe that she finally finds the right guy, and I feel like she would have at that point, but
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, she's gone through so much. Like, by the end of this film, you're just like, my God, she deserves someone nice.
I mean, obviously, like, Ethan Hawke's character is present, but as the movie goes on, you see there's more distance where, like, Mason's having to make more, like, video calls to his dad and stuff. And it's just, again, a reminder, like, single parent life, thank goodness I don't have to deal with it. But, like, when I see single parents, they're superheroes. Like, the amount of stuff you have to do as a single parent is overwhelming. And the way Patricia Arquette carries that in this film is really fun. It's phenomenal. She's just like on another level in this movie.
Yeah, she's definitely my favorite performance. How about you, sir?
Same. I wanted to give it to Ethan Hawke because I love him so much, but like she's the movie. You like everything flows through her decisions and what happens there. So she had to get my pick.
Acting score for me for Boyhood, it's pretty exceptional. I think because the film is focused on Ella Coltrane and he has some wobbles, I think, for me, through that middle period when he kind of has to act at a very young age and is struggling a little bit, I think. But he does turn out great in that last 45 minutes. But yeah, saying that, everyone else, as we said, Patricia Arquette, exceptional, Ethan Hawke, exceptional, and even, the awful boyfriends, husbands are horribly brilliant. So yeah, I'll go like a 9.9. Yeah, 9.2.
We're like right in this. We're in the same ballpark on this one. I went 9.0 because
Yeah.
if it would have been, if I would have based on our Arquette and Hawk, it's a 10 out of 10. Coltrane, a couple of points, just sort of like it dips a little bit, just a touch. It's not bad, but like I think I felt comfortable with a 9.0. This is still exceptional acting from the entire ensemble.
Yeah. Right, let's add up the scores then for Boyhood. Boyhood gets a very impressive 54.3.
Wow.
Which is very, very good.
Are we nearing Lighthouse territory?
Very much so. Very much so. That's it for part 1. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 2 to see who wins. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episode. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.